Hello, Mallards! It is Sunday, and as promised, I am here to talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And this is the second in the Miles Morales Sony animated series. So there was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and then there will be Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse. And the first thing that I want to say, and I'm counting this as not a spoiler, this film is part one of two. Like, Across and Beyond were billed as two films that are like telling a single story, and the next one releases in March of 2024. And I know this because I pretty religiously follow Marvel content. But as I was sitting in the theater with people, I realized a lot of people don't know that. And so when the film ends with a to be continued, people were kind of upset. Which seems fair, actually, all things considered. If the layperson doesn't know that this is going to be a we cut off when the action gets crazy sort of thing, I can see how it would be very upsetting. So I just want to mention that to you guys. So moving forward, if you are going to see this film, you know that that's going to happen. And now the spoilers begin. I love the Spider-Verse films. I think what Sony has created by choosing Miles as their hero is amazing. They have really opened themselves up to showing all sorts of spider people, and it's some of the most diverse content that we're getting out there, and it's geared towards people of all ages. I think there's something in this film especially that like younger kids can graft onto and adults can graft onto. And I think that's partially because this particular chapter of the story is kind of focused on parenthood. And so the kids understand it because they are children and they relate to Miles and Gwen and the stuff that they're going through. And the parents and adults sort of see the other side of it because there are several parents. So obviously there's Gwen's father and there's Miles' dad. And Peter Parker has Mayday in this, so he's also like a new dad. And Miguel like lost his daughter, but he was also a dad, and he's dealing with like that loss. And Jessica Drew is currently pregnant and going to become a mom, and so she has that to think of. And so it's interesting to see people in all of these sort of like different stages of parenthood and what that means to each of them, and sort of how they treat the outside world through that lens, because a lot of what they think about and how they conceptualize is through the lens of how they feel about their children, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's just a different perspective and kind of fun. In a lot of properties like this, you don't have a lot of parent-child relationships because a lot of people have absent and or dead parents. I mean, Peter Parker for one. So that sort of relationship isn't always explored in Marvel properties in particular. Or if it is explored, it's often in the like, oh, they're gonna die during this, which does not happen in this particular film. So I thought that those dynamics were really interesting. And the humor is driven both ways too. So like there's humor that kids will get, there is humor that only adults will understand. And they ride that line very, very well, especially when you get into the Spider Society and you're meeting all of the different spider people. And there's a spider person for everyone out there. Highlights for me is the T-Rex, which is maybe called Spider-X. I don't remember, but it's a giant T-Rex in a Spider-Man costume. Peter Parked car, everybody's favorite sentient vehicle who is a spider person. Spider Bite played a major part, and I really like that character. She's sort of a digital avatar for a young woman who then like becomes a spider person in the digital space, and I think that's really cool. I hadn't seen her before, but I think she has comics, so I'm gonna try and look her up because I really enjoyed her. Spider-Punk is great. I love Spider-Punk. Obviously, Miguel O'Hara, who's Spider-Man 2099, plays a huge part. He is the other main protagonist – in this particular film. there are a lot of incredible little jokes about spider people and like little moments with a bunch of different spider people. There's a spider cat. Obviously, Spider Ham is back for a little bit. But I do have a spot in my heart for Ben Reilly, who is a terrible person like 98% of the time. But there's this great scene where they're trying to get him to help, and they're like, Benny, and he goes, I can't. I'm just thinking about my memories. They're just so horrible. Oh, that was such a bad one. I'm like, if that is not the most absolute dramatic thing in the entire world, which is Ben Reilly's entire existence, I don't know what is. And I thought it was peak comedy. I giggled for a solid minute after that little scene, because that's kind of who he is. He's kind of whiny, and he's just like, oh, my life, it's so hard. And to be fair to him, like, he's a clone of Peter Parker, and his life has been kind of hard and confusing and difficult, but also he's just a spider person. All of their lives are hard. It's a given. And that was another really interesting exploration in this film, and one of the things I really liked. So one of the things that Miguel addresses is the Spiderverse, although he calls it something different that I don't remember. It's a very long name. He says Spiderverse is dumb, and then he says something that's definitely worse. But it's essentially a web connecting all of the spider people across the multiverse, and talks about canon events that happen with each spider person. So things like a police chief dying saving a child while the spider person is doing something else, or all of the deaths of an uncle figure, which like Miles also experienced when his uncle died, like that sort of thing all the way back. And it's interesting to see that even though all of these spider people are so diverse, they do have a lot in common. And unfortunately for them, a lot of what they have in common is suffering. But what I really like about this film is that Miles says, no, I don't want the suffering to be what defines us. We are heroes. I don't have to agree to that. I can make my own destiny, and I'm gonna make my own destiny. And I love that he jumps out and does that, and that sort of spurs his side of the story. And watching Miguel kind of grapple with Miles not wanting to go with that, when Miguel tried to buck the system and it went so horribly for him, like he lost his daughter, he lost an entire reality, like things did not go well for him. So he has good reason to want to stick to this system. But also, sometimes the suffering perpetuates more suffering. And so I'm very excited for the next part to see how they deal with that all together. And like, as it becomes very much a spider versus spider sort of situation, what's going to develop out of that. The one bummer about it being a 2-part film is that you really feel yourself building to a lot of these things, but there's like no resolution in this particular film. And that's kind of a bummer. But I liked the character development all the way around. I thought that they treated Gwen very well. We started in her world. We really got inside of her head in a way that we didn't in the first film. So I felt like we got to see the other side, and rather than her sort of sharing her story and us seeing Miles' perspective on it, we really got to be with her and her experience, which I enjoyed. And we got to revisit Peter Parker. We got to spend our time with Miles. We got to learn about Miguel. Like, every spider person that we spend a significant amount of time with really got to come into their own and develop a character. And a lot of the familial relationships were really good. Like, the relationship between Miles and his parents was very important in this, and I really liked the way that that built. And I also loved the Spot. I can't believe that the Spot is the villain that they chose. Like, what an absolute wild, out of left field choice. But the Spot is just perfection. He's like, I'm your nemesis. And Miles is like, I don't even know who you are. And I love that energy. Like, he's just chaotic. He's a great villain for this film because he's not particularly scary, and he's also not nefarious. So he's pretty sympathetic because you understand like how he feels. His life was sort of ruined by this thing that they did with the collider at the end of the first film. And so you feel a little sympathetic, and mostly he's just silly. He's got a little bit of this like Deadpool-esque quality to him in temperament and attitude. And I'm a sucker for that type of character. You know, I love myself a quippy, kind of a mess, probably not exactly moral sort of character, and that's exactly what he is. So I had a lot of fun with the spot. In general, I had a lot of fun in this film. From start to finish, I think that it is well-paced and beautifully designed, and the art is incredible. They go to all these different multiverses, and even though it does have a cohesive style overall, each universe is still individualistic. And I really like the Spider Society coming together in 2099, where all of their different animation styles are just the characters and not the backgrounds. Spider-Punk looks so good at all times. And I like that he creates, so the spider people have these watches that allow them to travel through the different multiverses without glitching. Glitching is what happened in the first film. And Hobie makes one for Gwen near the end of the film when she decides that she also doesn't believe what Miguel is saying and that maybe Miles is right, and starts to gather people around her who believe in Miles while Miguel is gathering people who believe in him. Hobie makes her own wristwatch so that she can travel even though Miguel's cut her off. And every time she uses it, it uses the Spider-Punk style animation to make the portals. And I just thought that that was fun. Overall, it's a really enjoyable film, and I highly recommend checking it out. The plot is intriguing, the characters are fun, and I think what they're building to will be really interesting. And there's also a dynamic at the very end where Miles ends up in a different world where there was no radioactive spider to create a spider person, and he gets to see what the world is like without a Spider-Man. Also, there are nods to like all the MCU and all of that stuff. Like, it's a great film. Highly recommend. Definitely check it out. Just be prepared for it to be part 1 of 2. That's the most important thing. I don't want you to be frustrated when you get to the to be continued. I want you to be like I was, where I could feel it building. I was like, oh, here it comes. Like, I can feel the end happening right now. And I liked it. I'll see you tomorrow.